This show brought to you by Circle of Seven Productions, www.cosproductions.com. Please be sure to subscribe and welcome to our circle.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Readers Entertainment Radio, and I am your host, Patricia W. Fisher. I'm going to be talking to you about fabulous authors and about their wonderful books and stories and how they got from the concept to the actual print book or the digital book that everybody is asking about. And today I have a fabulous guest. He is a gentleman here from the same town as I am, San Antonio, and his name is Fernando Rover Jr. He is an author and born and raised here in the Lone Star State. He attended Texas Lutheran University, and he earned a dual bachelor's in arts in English and history. He is currently earning a Master's of Arts in Communication Studies at Gonzaga University. His writing interests range from millennial interest, popular culture, black male experiences, feminism, LGBTQ, and the spoken word poetry. His work has appeared in Odyssey, Caged Bird, Buddies, Black Press USA, and San Antonio Observer. And in 2019, he released a poetry anthology, Labyrinth. It's available now on Amazon, but it was selected as the 2019 Best Indie Book Award for Poetry. So I am super excited to welcome to the show today Mr. Fernando Rover Jr. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for being on today. I was incredibly excited to see obviously a local author to win this Indie Book Award. How were you always a poetry writer, or were you a short story writer? Where did you start your writing journey?
I originally started in fiction. I was freelance, I did fiction writing as a hobby when I was in my elementary, middle, and high school, and then I went on to study English in college, English and history, and then I kind of stumbled into journalism because I got a newspaper scholarship to write for the school paper. So I did nonfiction writing for a few years, and then once I graduated and I graduated from college, I stayed abroad for a few weeks, and then I came back, and then really just the ideas kind of came to me in a poetic voice.
Sure.
And then at the same time, I discovered open mics here in San Antonio, and so I would go to a couple, and I would kind of watch them online, and so that's so I guess a combination of curiosity and just kind of a very large creative think tank kind of led to the idea of, okay, well, let's try a poetry book. So,
were you a big poetry reader before then?
Oh yeah, definitely. Again, okay. I'd always been a lover of books, so that's what led me to wanting to major in English. And I definitely was a fan of Langston Hughes. I was a fan of Maya Angelou, Robert Frost, and in some cases Shakespeare as well. I took a class on him, and I admit I was kind of leery about taking a class on him because he's just so difficult to understand. But once we read his sonnets and so on and so forth, you kind of, a lot of our technique actually comes from him. A lot of the influence, a lot of the metaphors you use and the meter and all that good stuff, a lot of that comes from what Shakespeare kind of revolutionized a lot of it. I mean, a lot of it was done before his time, but he was one of the first well-known individuals to really take it and kind of run with it.
Right. And it also helped, too, around that. It was not too long after that the printing press came about. So then you had a much broader reading audience, of course, people who were actually allowed to, be literate. But, I mean, that also propelled him forward. And it's interesting that you bring up Shakespeare because I know a lot of people are intimidated by it who maybe just had to read it in high school or junior high, sometimes in college. And one of the big things that I always push for people to do if they're intimidated by, say, reading a biography about somebody new or starting with a children's book, and they're actually children's adaptations of Shakespeare. So you can get those same. So I had a gentleman I know that said, I've never read it, and I'm not sure I want to. It's on his bucket list. So it was very cool to find that there's layers of pulling people into those different worlds of literature. So it was very cool to see. But so you've read the multiple poets and wonderful poets. What were some of the go-to books for you through elementary school into high school and on and beyond? Just for your own, voracious knowledge base.
So one of the very first books I ever read that really influenced me, I didn't realize that until later. It actually wasn't a fiction book. It actually wasn't a poetry book. It was a fiction book. It's called Bud Not Buddy. It's written by Christopher Paul Curtis. And so we read it actually in fifth grade. Our fifth grade teacher read it to us, and I went back and read it myself. Back then they had those scholastic book fairs and the book orders, and so you would order books, and they would come in to sit through the classrooms. And the reason why it influenced me was because that was one of the first books I remember reading that was by an African American male. And he was a children's book author. You know what I mean? There were other authors that were around, but I didn't read like James Baldwin and Langston Hughes and the other writers until I was like in high school or college. But in elementary school, like if I could pinpoint the first book that really influenced me, that was that one, Christopher Paul Curtis. And then going on into middle school, again, a lot of the Greek tragedies like on Cronus and Era, and a lot of I liked how the creative imagination, like they were a lot of fables and folklores, and that was really interesting. And in high school, of course, so I was an honor student from 7th grade all the way until 12th grade. So we got to read all the cool books. We read everything from The Giver to we read Hamlet, Macbeth, To Kill a Mockingbird. Like a lot of those books were very influential. And then 11th grade and 12th grade was when my English teacher was like those two classes we were given free reign to do a report on a book of our choice. And so I picked I picked a book. It's called The Known World. It's by Edward Norton, I believe. And it was interesting because it was a book about slavery, but the slave owners were African American, which was a shock to me at the time. We're used to hearing it being the other way around. So that was interesting. And then there was another book that influenced me that I wouldn't understand its influence until much later. So actually, when I was writing Labyrinth, it's a book called the author's name I can't pronounce because it's Swahili and African, but the book's title is For Color Girls, and it was a book of poetry written from the perspective of women of color, and they touched on different topics, and I thought it was great. It was a great book of poetry, but I feel like there was something like that missing, but it needed its own male voice, not male voices in the book, because the book was fine the way it was, because it was central to the female experiences. But I had never found a male book written by a male author about black men that was that vulnerable and that was that honest before. I had never seen that before, and I didn't see that for the next 3 or 4 years of college. And so when I got to a point to write Labyrinth, that's what I was looking for. I was looking to really convey experiences of black men from a perspective of being vulnerable and being honest and being raw in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of times that's taboo because as men in general, but black men in particular, we're not taught to express our feelings. We're not taught to express our thoughts or our emotions. So I knew I was kind of breaking a lot of rules, but all the authors say when you're an author, you break rules. So you're not an author if you're not breaking rules. So
that's true. And I mean, I think, is it Toni Morrison that said if you don't see a book out there that's, you want to read, write the book. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's exactly what you did. And I talked to so many authors about this, and it's like I wanted to read a book about my experience. I wanted to read a book about this, and although I was finding some, they weren't, really hitting the mark for me. So, and it's Your story is classic, beautiful for a committed writer, because it's not just as easy as let me slap this on page and go on with my day. It's almost all consuming just to get those words right, and then of course the editing process, which is so much fun.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. So how did you've decided you're going to write this book, and what made you, because there's always the discussion about, do you send it to a publisher, do you self-publish it? You decided to self-publish it, and then what was your process there? Because I know a lot of people think, if you do it on your own, if you do indie self-pub, that's an easier path. But there's plenty of things that you have to cover in that process. Walk us through what you did.
Well, it was 100% me. I honestly, I had some perspective and I had some tips because I had a couple of classmates from college and a lot of my professors, they published through Amazon. The reason why I chose self-publishing, is, and I'm just going to be 100% honest and transparent with you, I wanted to maintain my artistic voice. Oftentimes when you go through traditional publishing, you kind of have to negotiate a little bit of your artistic integrity because, it's a business, and they have to make sure that your book is marketable. They have to make sure that, there's a market for it and that it can sell. And so that means they have to kind of tweak and tailor certain things to make it, you know what I mean? But oftentimes what you present to them, by the time it's the finished product, it looks like a totally different book. And I think we're moving towards more indie self-publishing now, because I think a lot of times, no offense to, Simon & Schuster and Random House and all the big name publishers, but, the recent books that I've seen them releasing, they haven't really been, they've been good sellers, but I wouldn't say I see myself or I see my experiences in those authors or in those books that they're selling. And so that was a big, I remember I had a professor of mine who published a book herself. She published it through an independent university press. And she was very adamant, and I thank her for that every day for that, when she said, well, if you want to be a published author, be prepared to work. Be prepared to sell yourself, because either if you go through traditional publishing, you'll have to work with somebody. You go through self-publishing, you got to do a lot of the work yourself, but you still have to figure out like your own, like you're your own marketer, you're your own agent, you're your own editor, you're your own illustrator, you're your own art director, you're your own seller. Like, you have to kind of figure out what you're going to do from A to Z. And so I made the decision to go independent, because I knew that I could control how it's sold and how it comes out, how it's created. And really it was, I thought to myself, well, who else can market this and promote this book better than me? I'm the author. A lot of the experiences I've either seen firsthand or experienced firsthand. So yeah, I made the decision to go indie, and I chose Amazon because it was easier at the time. And it was the good thing about Amazon is that they only cover printing costs. So really they only take a percentage of how much it takes to print. They don't take anything else after that. And you set the price and what's really great I like about Amazon is that they never let you set the price lower than $9. They want it to be above $10, because I think, to me, that speaks volumes about they appreciate your value, because oftentimes, they'll say, put it at $5 or put it at $6, and it's like, well, so they let you set the price. Of course, they do have guidelines, like your imagery has to be. It's one thing. It's because there are a lot of erotic authors that use Amazon, but again, the imagery can't be offensive. It can't be. There are certain strict guidelines that you have to kind of stick in front of. You have free reign to do what you want, but the imagery and the language can't be offensive, and and really that's a good point, because how are you going to sell that if it offends people? You know what I mean? Like, how are you going to sell that if it's not, again, you have to understand that there has to be a market for it, but you also have to understand that you can't just sell to one audience. I wanted to do that, but I always knew that even though my book is for Black men and for Black experiences, I also have to I can't just, bash other minorities and other people and, kind of say it's all about me. Like I have to kind of, come at it from a different angle. So that's, yeah.
Right. I mean, you want your audience to be as broad as possible. Right. Mm-hmm. And knowing, and it's hard because poetry books are a harder sell because I think a lot of people don't appreciate it as much as we probably should. And there's a big push right now within the indie markets and the traditional markets, and there's a big upheaval specifically right now with the Romance Writers of America. They're having a big problem with own voices and making sure all that's fairly represented. So there's this big transition going on right now. There is a call for diversity, and there is a call for own voices and diverse. And I use that word loosely because there has always been wonderful authors out there. And what are you wanting to read? But I think it's important that people are putting sometimes those uncomfortable discussions out there because we can't change our ideas, or even if we feel like we're a good ally or we're a good person to stand next to whomever, do we really understand what their voice is and their experience? And I think poetry and books help all of us understand each other a little bit better. And so I really appreciate you writing this. And I was reading your book, and one particular poem I really hit me was called "Token" that you had written. And I mean, it's very straightforward and raw, and like you're saying, that was the point of the book, was to lay things on the table and say, here we are.
Correct.
When you're writing your poetry, do you just, as Hemingway said, open a vein and bleed on the page? Do you do that and then go back and let it sit there and then go back, or do you edit as you go? What is your style?
Honestly, with this project, it kind of varied. I think some of the poems were written over a course of a few years. So some of them did have to sit back, and I kind of had to revisit them. Sometimes re-edit them, sometimes revise them over and over again because they just weren't right to me. And then some were kind of born on the page. Token was one of those poems. Actually, it was actually born as I was watching the Golden Globes. I believe it was 2018, and I learned that it was crazy because there was, I think, maybe one or two African-American winners at the Golden Globes, and then the previous year, the Oscars, there was no African-American winners. And so my whole thing is and if there was one movie with one African-American, or if I would see a TV show and there was one male character, there was one African-American character and they didn't speak, or they spoke every other scene or didn't speak at all. And so I just kind of got to a point where I was like, I'm at a point where it's like, yeah, I'm not going to be your token. I'm not going to be your symbol of diversity, even though you're not really diverse. You just have me there to show that you're diverse. Right. So really it kind of started off as a list. Honestly, I would just say, my blackness is not for you to take and create a space where it doesn't exist. My blackness will not be seen as a joke. My blackness will not be seen as a reason to say this. It was kind of just things that I had been noticing, in the media or TV or television shows. Because I feel like we as African Americans are kind of made to be like caricatures. Oftentimes we're there for comic relief and shock value, which is not really value, in my opinion. So
sure.
I think really that one in particular was just a response to what I've been seeing, and I kind of was just writing it as it came to mind. But there were some other ones like, for example, I believe it's called 2 Our Years Ahead. That one was written. That one was written actually after my sister passed away, and it actually had another title on there, and it kind of sat there for a minute. I actually wrote a blog post, and then I turned it into a poem. so it kind of has an interesting history behind it. And then the title was called A Field first, because that's kind of what you are when you're grieving somebody. Like, you're not there. You're kind of just you're out to lunch. And so it was a good title, but it didn't pop off the page with that title. And so I decided to call it 2 Our Years Ahead, because my sister, her name was Toya, but we call her Toya for short, so TOYA. So if you look at it, it's 2 Our Years Ahead. It's an acronym for her name. So I feel like that's more, because I feel like that kind of summed up what I was really feeling when I was grieving. And so that one sat for a minute, and then I kind of kept looking at it over and over again to kind of see what I can do with it. And then I finally titled it 2 Our Years Ahead, and it felt complete. So honestly, different ones require different things. So
when you're going through school, high school, elementary school, and such, and you're writing and you're reading, did you ever approach any of your instructors and say, I'm thinking I might want to write it, like you're saying, fan fiction, or not fan fiction, fiction, short stories, or whatever? What kind of advice did you get from your instructors?
Keep writing.
Good.
Just write. Write it to get out of yourself, and then go back and edit later. It's really, they say it's not good to edit as you go, because you never finish oftentimes. Just kind of get the thought out first before you actually do it. And then also, just keep writing, and keep developing your voice, and also read everything, not just Black authors, not just female authors. Read everything, and always live too, because you're not an author if you don't live. Because how else are you going to have material if you don't live? And so I think, and that makes sense, because it wasn't until I traveled for the first time that I really had some really strong material. I think beforehand I had a lot of potential and a lot of good voice, but I was only 19, 20, 21 years old. I hadn't seen a lot at that point. I'd seen some things, but I didn't know a lot. But at 22, 23, 24, then 25 is when I eventually released the book. 18 to 25 is a big stretch of time. That's 7 years.
Oh yeah.
And I'd seen a lot of myself, and I'd seen a lot of myself change in those 7 years. I'd witnessed the first African American president during that time. I'd witnessed the Black Lives Matter movement. I was 20 when that movement sprung up, and then I was in college, and we were having those conversations about, on the news of those different killings. I remember I was working in a nonprofit when the 2016 election happened, and that conversation that happened. I remember all of that. So I'd seen a lot over that span of 7 years, and so I think that's why Labyrinth is so strong, because a lot of those poems were born out of thoughts and questions that I had during those times.
Sure. And where did you get to travel?
I went to Scotland for 2 weeks. I took a class. It was like a theology class, and the trip was part of the class. And then, and we were there for 2 weeks. I got to explore. I got to kind of walk and meditate and sit and be quiet for a minute. And it was fun, but it was also kind of scary, because I was in another country by myself. My family didn't go. I was with students and professors, but I was the first one in my family to study abroad. So there was a lot of anticipation and a lot of nervousness from my parents and family. There's so much going on in the world nowadays, which I understood that Scotland was 100% safe. It was, and then where I was at, I was on an island, so it was really hard to get to that island. So we were very, very, very safe and secure. And it was just, like I said, it was just nice to just be there and just to walk. There was a beach right by our lodge, and so we got to go there and just kind of sit and, kind of listen to the waves. And then also I journaled a lot, so I journaled some stuff. And then when I got back, I had the idea of doing like a project. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a poetry book or a novel. I was the first time I finally had material that I could turn into a project. I just didn't know if it was going to be a poetry book or a novel, but I think it became poetry because, again, the ideas came in a poetic voice, and at the time I was exploring poetry. So,
what time of year did you guys go to Scotland?
it was summer of 2016. So,
okay,
2 weeks in June.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would assume that you guys would go in the summer because winter's pretty brutal.
Oh yeah,
up
no,
there.
it snows and it's a blizzard. Mm-hmm. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, 4 hours of sunlight and it's just,
nope. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I got to go to Norway in college, and in the summer, and it was very like your body clock's already messed up because of just the jet lag. And then it's light until, midnight, and then it's never really totally dark, but it's just kind of a twilighty, and then it's light again at 3 or 4 in the morning. It's very disorienting. So I assume with you going in June, it was a similar, amount of sunshine going on while you were there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, in June,
absolutely.
not January. Oh yeah, and it was still pretty chilly, right? With it being there, even though it's summer.
It's kind of like winter here. Like it's not really winter, but it was still overcast and a little bit of breeze. But to me, it was doable than what their winter really is like. So
yeah, it's Scotland, and they're just it's a beautiful country. It's just it gets cold for sure. So as you're writing this, and you're going to, you've done the artwork inside or the photography inside, you formatted it, you've got it ready, and now you've submitted it to the contest, the indie contest. What was your reaction? Because when you submit to a contest, you just okay, it's done, it's out, I can't think about it now, and then you get the notification that you've won. What was that like?
Shocking. I was at work. Actually, I was at work, and I got an email, and I told my coworker, I was like, "Hey, can you come and read this really quick? Because it's legit." And then it was legit, and it was crazy because I couldn't really announce it until like much later, because they were still counting and still kind of finalizing it. And once they sent their joint press release was when I was able to do it. So I kind of waited a few days. And so when I kind of had to sit on it for like 2 days, which is really hard, because I was like, I want to tell people, but I can't, because they send you an email and they say, okay, you've won preliminarily, but until we send our press release, we ask them that you not leak out the information, that like people that didn't win can be notified, and that way it's fair. So, no, it was a huge shock, because I submitted it like last minute. I was like, well, I kind of wanted, because I was always told, it doesn't matter if you win, just so long as you submit your work, and then for people, because that way it can get in front of other people's eyes. And so, but when it won, I was very, very shocked, and to win in the poetry category was crazy, because again, it's self-published, it's independent. I'm a first-time author. I wouldn't even call myself a professional poet. Like I just had an idea and I just ran with it. So it was very much the non-traditional route. So it was rewarding, very rewarding.
I bet it was. And you've done some open mic nights here in San Antonio, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And do you have one coming up? Or you just had one?
I have a book signing coming up, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
And where
will
that be held?
It's at the event center. So THA and the event center. It's at 329 Aransas Avenue, 78210.
Okay.
If you follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Fernando Rover Jr., all one word. There's a poster that's circulating around, and it's February 29th, next Saturday, and it's from 4 to 6.
Okay. And all of your social media, for anyone listening, all the social media for Mr. Rover will be in the write-up of the show, and I'll have all the links for all that as well as the buy link for his book to Amazon. And so now that you have events coming up and people are coming up and talking to you about your writing and everything. What is the next project? What is your next writing project?
Oh, that's been the $1 million question. I can say that I have something. Okay. Cooking. I always do. Okay. I always have ideas. It's definitely going to be along the realm of what Labyrinth was. There will be photographs and there will be content like poems in there. And I am working on it steadily. But I'd rather keep it a secret about when it's going to come out.
Sure. Yeah, I always think that the second project is the hardest because, the first, nobody knows you exist in the publishing arena, and now you've had the success with this first book and the new release. People have read your stuff, and they're saying, where's the next thing? And, yeah, it's just, but you got to, like you're saying, you want to give it the same care that you did for the first one, and that's... Yeah.
Jeffrey, I'll probably butcher his last name, but Jeffrey Eugenides, he wrote The Virgin Suicides in Middlesex. He once said that, you write your first book in a huge state of innocence. Like, you don't know what you're doing, nobody knows who you are. But the second book is when you teach yourself how to be a writer because people know who you are now and, you've gone through the experience and the process. So the second project is really when you become an author because it's like, it's kind of like he said like your first book is like a gift.
Right. And now everyone knows who you are. So what was the reaction from your family when you got to tell them that you had won this award?
Same as mine. Very shocked, but very proud.
Oh, well, yeah.
It was really great. And, the San Antonio Observer, they're a newspaper here, and they did a story on it because, I write for them, freelance, some writing for them, and so it was a big deal. Well, it was a big deal because, I'm from San Antonio, so to have one of their own become a award-winning author, they want to profile that and show that as a good thing. And so it was. But not only that, but I also think because I was African American, that was also another big part because it was important, and I knew that. I knew that me being African American was a huge thing because that meant that our voice was being heard by someone, and So, but they were very proud, and they were surprised but not surprised because I've wanted to be a writer since I was 9 years old. So
sure. Well, and you've also written not only this, but you've written multiple articles for the Observer, the San Antonio Observer, and you've got other articles out there as well. So this is not like you just sat down one day and said, "I think I'll be a writer." This is a process of a lot of hard work, and like you've said, you've done a huge amount of research and reading and done the homework on traditional versus self-published. And I do you have people now coming up to you and saying, "I've always wanted to write a book," and they want you to tell them in 30 seconds or less the process? Do you have that now? And then people are looking at you like, "Well, it just can't be that hard," but then you tell them the process and they go, "Oh yeah, no, I'm probably not going to write a book."
Not so many, maybe a couple, but not a lot. But I'm sure as time goes on, as the book becomes more successful and people know more about it, I definitely will start getting more of that. But yeah, as it's true, the idea of writing a book is more appealing than actually doing it. Than actually doing it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's always I want this title, but I think, what was it the other day? I was listening to someone say, I want to be the noun, but what is the verb to get you to the noun? So, what are you going to do? You're going to work. You're going to study. You're going to get to the title. And so that's the trick, isn't it? To work really hard. And I don't think it's anybody who's successful knows that. So anybody successful within their world, but I think that anybody who pours their their guts and their emotions on the page like you have. It's definitely a process. And with some of your poems, I mean, they're very, very honest. All your poems are very honest. But was there times when you had to be in a certain mindset to write certain ones? Like you're having a particularly good day, particularly bad day, this is the time to do this.
Yes. Yes,
yeah.
There were some. There was, like I said, when I was grieving, I didn't write for a bit, but then I started writing and became healing, and it kind of just slowly got weaved into the project. I didn't go into it with the idea of, okay, I'm gonna put this in the book, but it just kind of happened that way.
Sure. How do you know when? And I think a lot of authors do this too. How do you know when what you're writing? So you're writing all these different poems. How do you know that poem is finished?
When the voice stops talking to me.
Okay.
When the voice has nothing else to say. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is your best advice for young African American men, young African American women, young people, anyone who wants to put their voice to paper? What is your advice to them?
Keep writing. Number one.
Mm-hmm.
Always have a question.
Okay.
But don't always look for an answer.
Okay.
Because sometimes you're the answer. And then don't be afraid to speak, and don't be afraid to go deep. Because oftentimes that's the fear. It's like, will people get it? Will people understand it? Doesn't matter. If you believe in it, if you feel like it's what you're meant to say, then it'll come across that way.
Yeah, I remember taking a class years ago, and it was, if you're not crying while writing this, if you're not laughing while writing, that whatever emotion you're trying to convey, your reader won't either. So, yeah, just throw it down and see where it goes. Do you, like, there's the reflections contest that happens every year for the different kids. Would you say that that's a really good place to start for some of the younger children, or even high schoolers?
Absolutely.
To say, throw it down, whatever poetry contest or writing contest, just throw it down and get in there. Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
What? How did you find out about the indie contest?
Google. Honestly, I was looking at different awards that I could enter to kind of get my work out there, and that's kind of what I found. Okay. Would you now? Are you eligible to enter it again for the next time, or can you just win it once and that's it? Okay. No, you can. No, and actually, there were several authors who've won twice.
Okay. Are you think in the future that might be something you want to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you've got your project you're working on. You're going to getting your master's degree, and you're working. I mean, you're just, but it's like all of it's all about the creative outlet, the creative spirit. Is there ever a day that you're just like, you know what, I'm not creative today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There are definitely days when that happens, and you just got to work through it. Honestly, it just happens, and you just have to understand that it's not forever. And it just sometimes the voice comes when it comes. You can't just always make it come. So yeah, definitely there are days when you feel like stifles, but
Yeah. And I think that's, and I ask these questions because I'm sure there's people that are listening that are going to say, well, what if you don't feel creative that day? And I do think it's a day. Sometimes it's just your brain saying, you know what, you just need to just take a day off. And like you're saying, go read something different. And what would you say to people saying, I want to make sure I have these books on my bookshelf. So you've mentioned like Bud Not Buddy and The Giver, the known world, and The Colored Girls, Hamlet, Macbeth, all the authors that you've mentioned, Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou, and what would you tell people to make sure and have on their bookshelves for just reading references or material, or would you just tell them to go find what interests them and then find something that they absolutely wouldn't normally read, or a mixture?
Find a little bit of both. Find what fascinates them, what calls out to them, but also any of their favorite authors that they've come across that inspired them to be a writer. Take a little bit of both. Familiarity, but also unfamiliarity.
Yeah. And I noticed that with your articles too within the Observer, you write the black male experience, but you also wrote this really great book about black girl literary magic. And it was just a really lovely article about Zora Neale Hurston, how she came about her books. And I think that it was really cool to see, you've written all these heartfelt poems about your experience, and you're also writing to push other authors as well. Do you see that that's something that a lot more authors need to do, in the sense of helping each other, succeed, and even authors that have long passed? Do we just keep talking about them, right? We keep pulling them into the public consciousness over and over again to make sure that their words are there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess I did that to your point, so I can tell her story once again, because there are some people that still don't know about her. But I also think that as writers, we're in dialogue with each other a lot. So
yes,
I think that's kind of where I was coming from with that. Is that here's someone who spoke about these topics and spoke about these experiences over and over again, and this is why they're important.
Do you read, is there a book or a couple of books you go to that are kind of your go-to books to help jumpstart or get you in the mindset to write? Like your favorites?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Which
Toni
one are
Morrison. Toni Morrison, Song of Solomon. Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, definitely. Any poems by Langston Hughes. I would say Hughes. And Hughes, Morrison, and Baldwin were definitely.
Okay.
Definitely my
because
go-to.
you do mention Giovanni's, because you mentioned Giovanni's Room several times in some of your poems, and you weave, you beautifully weave these different mentions of authors, and so it was really cool to not only read your stuff because it's just great, but also because it's like a little wink to those authors that have inspired you and encouraged you all these years. So I really, really appreciate you being on the show today. This has been wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And you have, if you want to see Fernando Rover Jr., he will be at the Event Center on February 29th. I will have the information for that in the write-up of the show, as well as how you can contact him, where you can buy his book, and talk to him online. So thank you again, sir, and I look forward. Please come back when you have your next project available. I'd love to see it. So thank you so much.
I will do that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And everybody, you keep on reading. Thank you again.
This show brought to you by Circle of Seven Productions, www.cosproductions.com. Please be sure to subscribe and welcome to our circle.
The Hollywood Reporter is your ultimate source for awards race news this fall. Go to THR.com to keep up with this award season's expert predictions from executive editor Scott Feinberg, and tune into the Hollywood Reporter's Awards Chatter podcast for exclusive interviews with the biggest names in showbiz. Stay in the loop with daily newsletters providing real-time updates on all the awards action. Subscribe to THR.com for full access to the Hollywood Reporter and never miss a moment of this fall awards season. Visit THR.com today.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.